2 minutes until we're officially live.
My Reef, one of my colleagues is on the wrong place.
Yeah, if anybody clicks on the screen early, there's a countdown going on right on the public screen, letting them know it's like 1:32 left, stuff like that. Thirty seconds.
Welcome. Welcome to the 9th Annual Thunder Bay International Film Festival, coming to you virtually this year with the latest in independent ocean and Great Lakes films and interactive discussions with filmmakers like today's with our partners and friends at Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. The Thunder Bay International Film Festival is produced by NOAA's Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which is located off the shores of Northeast Michigan and encompasses 4,300 square miles of northwestern Lake Huron. Thunder Bay is the only national marine sanctuary in freshwater and a national system of protected waters that stretches from the west coast to the east coast and from the Gulf of Mexico to American Samoa, south of the equator. Our mission in Thunder Bay is to protect an amazing collection of historic shipwrecks, and you can learn more about these shipwrecks at thunderbay.noaa.gov. And when the ice melts, you can visit them by diving, snorkeling, or even by glass-bottom boat if you don't want to get wet. And for everybody tuning in, please let us know in the chat box where you're at. And you can always use that chat function to submit your questions live for our guests today. My name is Sarah, and I work at Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And I am in Alpena, Michigan, where it's cold and there's some snow on the ground, but it is super sunny. So it's a beautiful, beautiful day. And I'm so happy to be hosting this live session on Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, one of our sister National Marine Sanctuaries in the eastern region of the National Marine Sanctuary System. So let's jump right into what you came here for and talk to our amazing guests from Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. First off, I would like to ask our guests, Michelle and Liz, to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their background and their relationship with Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary and their involvement with the films that are part of the film festival this year. And don't forget to tell the guests where you're coming from today. Let's start with you, Michelle.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Michelle Riley, and I joined Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary in 2015 as the communications coordinator. Our offices are located in beautiful Savannah, Georgia, and our offices are actually on the tip of an island off of Savannah called Skidaway Island. Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary is actually about 45 miles southeast of Savannah in the Atlantic Ocean. The closest landmass is Sapelo Island, Georgia, and Gray's Reef is only about 19 miles directly east from Sapelo Island, Georgia.
Great, thanks, Michelle. And Liz?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'm Liz Kaiser. I also live in Savannah, Georgia. I'm a filmmaker here, but Alpena is actually my hometown. And so being able to be part of the Thunder Bay International Film Festival is always great fun. And I'm very excited that we could join virtually this year. And kind of tie together my hometown of Alpena and then my adopted hometown of Savannah, Georgia.
So many connections, so many cool connections. That's great. So I guess let's just jump right into the two films from this year's festival. The one film really is like an oral history. Can you tell me how you two met and like how this film came about? Maybe Michelle, you want to kick that off?
Oh, sure. Yes. If it weren't for Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, I wouldn't have never met Liz, even though Liz and I live in the same city. I actually caught up with Stephanie at Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary when she was screening a film that you guys and Liz and Kyle all made for your International Film Festival a couple of years ago. I believe it's called the Deep Five Dive.
The Big Five Dive. Yep.
Yeah. And it was screening at the Savannah College of Art and Design's big film festival, which is quite a big film festival. And afterwards, Stephanie and I went to lunch, and she told me about this fabulous film company called Mad Law Media, and that they just happened by serendipity to live right here in Savannah. So that is how I located Liz and Kyle.
And Liz, how did you come up with, did Michelle kind of pitch that film to you, or did you guys talk about what it might look like? Like how did that kind of the theme of doing it in a series of oral histories, how did that arise?
Michelle had a pretty clear idea coming into this of what she wanted to do with this film, which is always, we actually really like it when somebody comes to us with a really clear idea, because we always feel like we can be more creative that way when they already can lay out the base of what the film is going to be like, and then we can just get creative with all the other parts of it. So she had from the very beginning, first phone call had said that this was going to be a collection of the oral histories that from the people who remembered the naming of Gray's Reef, who we would sit down and chat with and get those stories from, and then create a 8-minute-ish film out of that. And that's I mean, from the beginning, that's how it started, and that's actually how we followed through, which doesn't always happen. So it was very cool to actually have a really clear plan to start and then follow through all the way to the end.
Interesting. And Michelle, did you already had you already contacted many of these people that participated in the creation originally of Gray's Reef and getting it nominated and naming it, or did you have to jump into that after you had secured your filmmaker?
Yes, I actually jumped in after I had secured the filmmakers. It's quite a story that just like finding Liz and Kyle, it's a small world that Stephanie, all the way in Alpena, Michigan, introduced me to Liz and Kyle. The cast of characters really came together in such an interesting way. From the time I came to Gray's Reef in 2015, I had learned all about the geological history of Gray's Reef, how it was actually formed over millions of years. But I was never very clear on how this tiny little 22 square mile postage stamp in the Atlantic Ocean became a national marine sanctuary, and how somebody found it and how it was named after an individual person. And so it ended up just being a series of meetings. The first one was that I was actually filming with a news crew in Savannah, and the camera guy for the anchor that was interviewing us told me that his uncle was Jesse Hunt. And I knew that Jesse Hunt was a student back in the 70s at University of Georgia who had suggested that Gray's Reef be named after Milton Gray. And so because of that strange occurrence, I was able to find Jesse Hunt in New Orleans. Then a professor, Dr. Damon Gannon at University of Georgia Marine Institute on Sapelo Island, found the daughter of some folks that are deceased now. And they led me to a fabulous gentleman named Dr. Albert Green, who's in his 90s. And he actually worked with Sam Gray. And so there were our first two people. Then our third person, Reed Boney, who is the first superintendent of Gray's Reef, said, "Let me hook you up with Dwayne Harris. He used to be with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources." I start chatting with Dwayne and find out he himself was the person who wrote the nomination for Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. So it was just a fascinating, just serendipity and people knowing people.
And how did they react when you, I mean, so some of these folks you kind of cold called, right? And had to explain who you were. And were they excited to be contacted? Like what? So this, for most of them, this is about 40 years ago, right? How did they react?
Yes, it was just amazing. Everybody was they were just so wonderful and enthusiastic. And both Dr. Green, his entire family, and the daughters of two of the scientists that had been at the Marine Institute with Sam Gray, they all came down together at their own expense to be filmed. Meanwhile, Jesse Hunt drove in from New Orleans to be filmed. And I mean, you just could not have a nicer bunch of people. And many of them had not seen each other for many, many years. And the girls were only about 10 or 11 years old when they grew up going to a private school on Sapelo Island. And they knew Sam Gray and Mrs. Gray as really fun people to hang out with after school.
That is really cool. Is that something that both of you think? I didn't realize that. I assumed maybe all of those interviews were done, scheduled at different times. So it sounds like because you were able to get them all together at one time, that might have been like helped with the creative, different stories coming out that you might not have gotten to otherwise. Would you say that helped? And I guess it probably might be a challenge too with reliving so much of the past, like kind of getting that down succinctly for an 8-minute piece. Can you guys talk about the benefits and challenges of getting everybody together like that?
Sure. So from my side of things, from doing the filming side of things, Michelle had done a ton of legwork ahead of time and had pre-interviewed all of these people over the phone, and then taken those interviews and made them into transcripts. So because we knew it was only going to be an 8-minute piece and that we were going to have 5 people in it, we knew that each of them had a specific portion of the story that we wanted to get from them. So we kept the interviews actually fairly short because we didn't want to, we were out on the beach in February, which, we're in Georgia, so it's not bad, but it was kind of windy. There were a ton of sand gnats out that morning. So we were trying to keep everybody moving.
So what's the sand? Is that a bad thing? I don't know about sand gnats.
So sand gnats are sometimes known as no-see-ums, and they are these tiny, tiny bugs that you can't see that bite so hard that they will leave scars.
Oh, that's not good.
No, they are horrible. And They're tiny though, and so if there's a little bit of a breeze, they can't fly very well. So you want there to be a breeze. When we got there, there was not much of a breeze. So luckily, as the day went on, a breeze did start, and they lessened. But we, regardless, you know, these people had dedicated their time and taken out time to drive to us and, you know, be part of this. So we wanted to make sure that we kept everything moving along. So in terms of getting stories we weren't expecting in the actual interviews, we didn't really, but getting to actually eat meals with them, they had like a little cafeteria where we all had all of our meals together on the island. And it was just really cool to hear their stories about, you know, their time whenever they were, you know, there on Sapelo Island doing their research and everything like that. And that was really cool.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you remember any of those stories? Did any really stand out to you in terms of some of their experiences?
Yes, absolutely. I must say, one of the most touching things to me was to see Jesse Hunt, who I believe would now be in his 70s, meet up with Dr. Green in his 90s for the first time in decades. It was just so sweet to see their faces. And so as sat down, so we have Kathy Sakis, who first went to Gray's Reef in the 90s. So she was like the newbie. We had Dr. Green from 1961, Dwayne Harris from the late 60s, early 70s, Reed Boney from the 80s and 90s, and Jesse Hunt from the early 70s. And they started telling stories, especially Jesse, about they were trying to figure out what Gray's Reef was made of. And so today, where everything we do is to protect Gray's Reef and keep it in its pristine, vibrant way that it is now, Jesse and those guys had rigged up an underwater sleigh where they were just pulling the reef right off of the bottom of the ocean to figure out what it was made of. And so to me, that was horrifying and interesting all at the same time. But, then they also talked a lot about how Sam Gray had an attic full of jars of invertebrates that he would get from Gray's Reef. And we found out that today there are more than 200 lots of specimens that Sam Gray got that are at the Smithsonian Museum.
Wow. Sounds like an exhibit maybe in order sometime, huh?
Yeah.
So for those folks that are tuned in and haven't had a chance yet to watch the film, Michelle, could you talk about Gray's Reef, the composition of it actually? Like what, you know, how is it different than coral reefs we'd see? And I know you've lived on many ocean areas, right? You've lived in the Gulf, you've lived on the Pacific Ocean and the other side of the Atlantic. So how is Gray's Reef special? Oh, did we lose each other?
Hi.
I think Michelle lost your audio, Sarah.
Can you hear me now? Oh.
I don't think she can. Michelle, can you hear me, Michelle? I don't know if she can hear me either.
Oh, we might have lost her. Okay, well, we're waiting for to get Michelle back here. Our techs are going to help us work on that. Liz, I've got another question for ways on here. Have you been out on Gray's Reef, either above it in a boat or diving on it, or?
I unfortunately have not, no. And after seeing all of so we did all of the interviews, we did all of the editing, the graphics, all of that. But in terms of the underwater footage, NOAA provided that. So we actually didn't go out to do that. The weather was not great when we were out on Sapelo. And so it was probably for the best that can you hear us?
Good.
All
Awesome.
right.
You know, we didn't get the opportunity to go out either above or below the water at Gray's Reef. I would love to someday, especially having seen all of the really awesome footage and everything. I myself am not a diver, but I wouldn't mind going out on the boat and checking that out. But that area, Sapelo Island, and just that area of the coast is just so beautiful.
And for Manlaw Media, your company, you have done underwater filming as part of your stories in the past, so you have that capacity. What is it like when you can't take your own footage and then having to, does it make much of a difference as long as it's high quality or?
No, it was such high quality footage that it wasn't an issue at all. And the fact that it was the footage that we used, I think, was collected over a period of time from a bunch of different filmmakers and photographers and videographers who had gone down there. So we actually had a really great variety, you know, and if we had done that ourselves, a lot of times, you know, Kyle is the one who does the diving, my husband and partner in all of this. And he normally maybe would have half a day. And so that would mean he would have, you know, only what is there at that time. And, you know, there are different times when I know that we had footage of turtles and, you know, all different things that may not have been there whenever we had gone to try to gather footage. So it was really nice to be able to have that collection at our fingertips where we could choose and be able to highlight all the different cool, colorful, you know, lively things that are going on Gray's Reef throughout all the different parts of the year.
Well, that's great. And Michelle, this is a perfect segue. When we lost you, I was going to ask you if you could talk about, in case some of our viewers hadn't had a chance to see the overview of Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary film, what is special about Gray's Reef? You know, as a reef, how is it different than other reef areas we may think of, like Florida Keys or Australia's Great Barrier Reef? What makes Gray's Reef special?
Thank you. That's a great question. It is special in so many ways. I think the most important thing for those of us who are not marine scientists to know is that it is not a coral reef. So it's not a coral reef like you hear with the Keys National Marine Sanctuary or with the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary protects a live bottom reef. And so what that means is instead of a coral reef, which is built from the skeletons of hard corals that die and that's called reef building corals, ours is made from a hard bottom, which took millions of years to be created from sand and mud and shells all together. That hard bottom is called a substrate of sandstone. And invertebrates, animals without backbones, attach themselves to it. And so our corals are soft, wavy corals, and we have sponges and just every kind of animal you could almost imagine that does not have a backbone. So we have more than 900 species of invertebrates at Gray's Reef. And they cover this hard surface that rises up from the ocean floor to up to about 6 feet tall. And there's all these nooks and crannies and little caves they can dive in. And the invertebrates just cover it like a carpet. And then that attracts all the fabulous fish and the sharks and the shrimp and the lobsters and the octopus. And we even have little tiny seahorses. And we're also part of the calving ground of the North Atlantic right whale. So from the tiniest to the largest, it's a wonderful, wonderful place.
That is really incredible. I love that, from the tiniest thing to the largest thing. That's fantastic. So when you had an 8-minute piece that really focused on the oral history, but you wanted to show some of those video highlights from the reef with 900 invertebrate species, how did you pick? How did you decide which pieces of Gray's Reef to show in the limited time you had? Michelle, you want to start, and then maybe Liz can add her perspective?
Well, I think this is definitely a Liz question because
Okay.
I pushed everything I had at her. She had so much. And then on top of that, Mr. Dwayne Harris, the gentleman who had written the nomination to become a National Marine Sanctuary, he also shared with us the first known underwater photo ever taken of Gray's Reef. So we also had some really old photos. It was wonderful.
I went through the footage that Michelle had provided, and basically I think that of those 900, probably 800 are just camera shy because they weren't even on camera. So basically I just went through and I found anything where whatever was moving was actually not just hiding. And then that's the footage that we used. There wasn't much of a science to it, unfortunately.
Yes, that actually makes me realize, saying that one of the things we're very excited to be doing, hopefully in the near future, is some underwater telepresence at Gray's Reef. Right now, we have recorders that can record just the sound of the seascape. And we can also record tagged animals to hear what they say and when they're trying to talk to each other or communicate. But in addition to that, if we can get some cameras down there that can stay for a long time without people there, we're thinking that, many of the animals at Gray's Reef, if there's no people there, will show how they live their day-to-day lives.
Oh my gosh, that would be fantastic, like the secret zoo cams that you can watch, right? Oh, I'll be tuning in for that for sure. That is pretty cool. And speaking of keeping an eye on Gray's Reef, Michelle, how do people access? People can go there, not just sanctuary staff or scientists, right? It's do you have mooring buoys out there, or do people just go and find it and kind of jump over, and how do they get there?
Right. We do not have mooring buoys. So folks actually would need to have their own boat, or they could always charter a boat from some of the local boat captains. But indeed, you are allowed to fish at Gray's Reef, and you can keep the fish catch at Gray's Reef as long as they're within all of the size and weight and seasonal regulations. And you can dive at Gray's Reef, which lots of people have been doing, especially the last couple of years. It's all within some regulations. Divers should be advanced divers because the top of the reef is 65 feet under the surface of the ocean, and the currents can be kind of swift. So you would want that. But in Georgia, there are a lot of fishing tournaments in the summer that they call Kingfish Tournaments, and that's to catch the king mackerel. And this day, the record in Georgia of a king mackerel was about 75 pounds in 2004, and it was caught at Gray's Reef. And at Gray's Reef, you can only use just a normal rod and reel or a hand line. So it's just old-fashioned drift fishing, but fishermen love it. And additionally to that, I think we're one of the only sanctuaries that has a special area of our sanctuary that is just for scientists, so that they have a control area. And so we feel like we're very much a multi-use facility for fishers, divers, boaters, scientists.
That's amazing. I know I did notice that in the films that I felt like I could really see the current from the particulates in the water. It just seems, and you know, and the sea fans and things, like the way they move so quickly, to me, that definitely was indicating there's a lot of action going on there. So that makes sense. The people, you said there's charters to get out there. Do most people kind of go to Gray's Reef, would you say, from Sapelo Island, or do they head out from other ports? In the beginning, you said from Savannah, it's 45 miles. Did I have that right? And but only 9 from Sapelo?
No, 19.
19.
But,
so about
but
half. And how long does that translate to for someone in a boat? For somebody who might not be familiar with distances boating offshore, yeah.
Exactly. When we leave from our office in Savannah and go down the Wilmington River to the mouth of the Atlantic Ocean, all the way out to Gray's Reef, we can get there in about 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay.
People that leave directly from Sapelo can get there in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
The thing with Sapelo Island is, you know, one of the reasons that Georgia is so beautiful is that hardly any of our islands are really open to the public. And so there is a Gullah Geechee community in Sapelo Island in Hog Hammock, and they have a wonderful, thriving community, and you could stay in an Airbnb there if you want to. But other than Hog Hammock and the University of Georgia Marine Institute, Sapelo Island really doesn't have people. You have to get there by ferry. If you don't have a car, you're kind of stuck. So most people go from Darien, Georgia, which is the main town near Sapelo Island, and people go from northern Florida, they go from Savannah. There's all different access points and charter captains that you can charter to go out there.
I'm just getting the notes down, so when I can finally go somewhere, it's got to be on my list to come to Gray's Reef. Well, that's great. Very interesting. And let's hop back to Liz. I had forgot to ask, in terms of putting together a film that's a lot of oral history, so a lot of like what we're doing here, talking heads. What are some of the challenges of making that kind of compelling for people to watch?
Well, I think that, like I said, if there hadn't been so much pre-production put into this on Michelle's part, I think this one would have been a lot more challenging. But because we had already kind of laid out what the structure was going to be, and specifically what we wanted from each person, we could kind of guide them so that they would transition into what the next person was going to talk about. If you don't have that laid out ahead of time, you know, you have 5 different personalities who talk in 5 different ways, and it's kind of hard to have that, you know, through line for everybody. But when things are very well planned out, as this one was, it becomes less of a challenge, which was very nice. And luckily, we had so much gorgeous underwater footage to cut to. You know, I think that alone, you know, sometimes people can lose focus if it's just a lot of talking. Talking heads are just sometimes, I mean, we are obviously fascinating, but talking heads can sometimes not be fascinating.
Right.
But we had all of this. I mean, these interviewees were excellent interviewees. They really had some cool stories. And then we had really great footage to support it of what it looked like underwater. And we could show why this area was so important to them for the legwork that they put in early on to be able to designate it as a marine sanctuary. So what were you going to add, Michelle?
Well, I would just add that the reason that those pre-interviews came out so structurally sound is because you and Kyle sat down with me before I ever did the pre-interview. So you guys helped map for me exactly how to ask the questions in order to elicit a through line of the film that we knew we wanted. And so Liz, you might want to talk a little more about that, how y'all structure that to help me interview before.
Yeah, what is a through line? What do you mean? And this is a new term for me.
Basically, it's important to make sure that your interviewees are always coming back to what the subject was, why you're making this film. You know, sometimes they may have details that are really interesting, but don't support the story as a whole. So you just want to make sure that they're connecting, that one person connects to the next person, connects to the next person, connects to the next person, because that's what makes the story flow. Especially with all of these people involved, and that's really the through line, is just the connection from person to person. So, and you know, we've been doing documentaries for, I mean, together we've been doing them for about 10 years now, and so we've really learned the necessary way to approach getting someone to recollect, you know, something that may have happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've had a lot of experience with trial and error, what things don't work and what things do. And so we just kind of, you know, talked through with Michelle the best way to, you know, get these people to give us what we were going to need to really be able to tell this story well. And so I mean, this was a really, I mean, from the very beginning, like I said, Michelle came to us with a very clear idea of what she wanted to do. And then we just had a really good working relationship with this, that, you know, we were able to help each other really well, I feel like, and turn this into just a really great, short, but very, I think, informative and interesting film about Gray's Reef and about a piece of history that most people had no idea about.
Right. And I would just jump on that to say, we realized as we were developing the film that we really just made it by the nick of time. You know, if we waited 5 more years, I'm not sure that all of the real detail that we understood how this place in the ocean actually became National Marine Sanctuary, when there are only 14 National Marine Sanctuaries. I'm not sure we could have that full story had we waited longer. One of the things that Kyle and Liz helped with so much was to recognize that since some of our interview subjects, our film subjects, actually knew Sam Gray, the natural reaction would be to talk a lot about Sam Gray. And we did want to know that, but what we really wanted to know was how that piece of the ocean became a National Marine Sanctuary. So, you know, that had to be the through line. And Kyle kept helping me with that by teaching me to ask questions like, the first time you ever dove at Gray's Reef, was it cold or was it hot? Was it day or was it night? What was the first thing you saw? What is the first thing you remember? Yeah.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And it looks like we have a question from a viewer. So Finn and Alpina would like to know, what's the weirdest fish you've seen that's unique to Gray's Reef? And I would add in there, did any of your interview subjects have anything to say about critters?
I am not a diver either. I'm very lucky that our top scientist at Gray's Reef, I believe, is watching this. So if she wants to type in, Kimberly Robertson, please do. The weirdest fish that I've seen a photo of that Kim and her fellow divers have taken is the fish whose head is made with a lure on it, on its head. And so it attracts fish and then it eats them. So maybe Kim can tell us what that is if she's listening. Jesse Hunt told a fantastic story about, I believe it was his 10th or 15th dive at Gray's Reef. And as they were going up, they saw great white sharks. They got very scared, and when they popped up to the top, the boat was much farther away than it should have been. and they were having to swim to the boat, knowing sharks were going around them. But they were just fine. But he said to this day that was the most memorable dive he's ever had in his entire life.
I bet. Yikes. And in the films, both of the films, I think there is some footage, which I'm assuming is some of your divers that you just mentioned, some of your scientists that work at Gray's Reef, and they've got like slates and measuring tapes in their hands. And you mentioned earlier that you all listened, do some acoustic monitoring or listening for sounds, right? And so what else do they your scientists measure or look for, like just the size of the reef itself? Obviously, they're going to know what kinds of animals are out there and invertebrates and things that they see. But what else do they monitor?
Well, that is a great question because, you know, the primary reason that Gray's Reef was designated as a national marine sanctuary was because of the great diversity of animal species and the great abundance within those species at Gray's Reef. And what we do know, which you will see that Liz captured in the film, the oral history film, is that Gray's Reef is an excellent example of these type of live bottom reefs that's near shore, but most of them are much farther offshore than Gray's Reef is. They're much farther than 19 miles. And yet this system of live bottom reefs goes all the way from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, all the way down to about Cape Canaveral, Florida, in the Atlantic Ocean. So most of us have only ever heard of coral reefs. You know, it ends up that these live bottom reefs are everywhere in our part of the ocean. And so a lot of the research that our partners and research universities and other scientists do, and we facilitate and also do on our own, is learning the connections between all of these things. We know for a fact that, for instance, Georgia is kind of famous for its marshes, and the on Sapelo Island and out of the Altamaha River and some of the other rivers in Georgia, they actually set nurseries for many of the creatures that are at Gray's Reef, nurseries for shrimp and many different fish. So how do all these connections happen? So all these different scientists in various ways, using various topics, are kind of learning that larger connectivity of how animals use Gray's Reef, where they go in the ocean. Do they stay at Gray's Reef? Do they leave? It's really fascinating. I think it goes back to the ocean being so unexplored on this planet.
Is that part of why Sam Gray came down to Georgia, or was he from that area?
Oh, that's a great question. Sam Gray was actually at the famous Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And when the University of Georgia set up the Marine Institute, they actually asked a gentleman named Dr. V.J. Henry, whose daughter, Carolyn Rader, helped me find a lot of the other people for the film. Dr. Henry asked Sam Gray if he would come to the Marine Institute, and Sam and his wife Helen came down in 1961. And that is why it was so important for Liz and Kyle and I to gather everybody at the Marine Institute and film on the beach right next to the Marine Institute.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, we just had another question come in from a viewer. This question is probably one for Liz. It says, do you have any future plans to film in national marine sanctuaries?
Currently, we do not. However, we are always looking for new projects. So if anybody knows of anything that needs to be filmed in a national marine sanctuary, give me a call. We would love to do that. I think that we are very fortunate that we've gotten to work with both Gray's Reef as well as Thunder Bay. Being that there's only 14, we've already been able to do 2, and that's just really cool. So
12 more to go.
exactly.
And I believe that Liz and Kyle also film with a research scientist at Skidaway Institute of Oceanography that she deploys some of her instrumentation in Gray's Reef, even though y'all did not film there with her, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep, Kyle has done quite a bit of work with them at this point. Actually, the film that he did with them screened at Thunder Bay's International Film Festival last year. So you're absolutely right.
Well, we'll try to get you guys back for that, because this scientist is named Dr. Catherine Edwards, and Dr. Edwards already deploys these really fantastic bright yellow gliders into Gray's Reef to also track fish migration. But the next thing she's doing is she is creating robotic fish. So if you guys have ever seen those films on PBS or whatever, where they have the robotic squirrel or she is making robotic fish to track other fish, and she's going to deploy some of those into Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary to do her research and help us learn more about fish migration. And that would be fabulous to have Liz and Kyle get that on film.
That's really cool.
I need to see that. Cool. I need to see that movie. Make it happen. So continuing on that research theme, we've got another question. Brad wants to know, that's a good question, about threats to Gray's Reef. Are there any invasive species affecting the reef and threats that you guys deal with? Right.
Well, like so many areas of the Atlantic Ocean, we are concerned about the lionfish. They have not made way in as much abundance up to Gray's Reef as they have in the Florida Keys and in other parts of Florida. But our scientist, Kim Robertson, that I mentioned, and her science teams, they do remove lionfish when they see them. And we're also beginning for the first time to see species that are coming from the Caribbean into Gray's Reef, which shows, warming waters. We don't know if that's good, bad, it's just of interest, just changing, evolving things at Gray's Reef. And so all of the scientists are keeping an eye on that, and they're doing various experiments.
That's great, thanks. And so the biggest critter that comes to Gray's Reef, you said, is the right whale. Is that? And it's comes to calving grounds. Did I get that right? Did we lose you again, Michelle?
We might have. Yep.
Okay. Back to you, Liz. So I was going to ask, you guys got brought up what other film you might do in another National Marine Sanctuary, but I was going to ask if you could pick something to do as a filmmaker in Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. Is there anything that you would love to film there or create a film about in and around Gray's Reef and Savannah? Part 2?
Man, I know I could come up with something great if I had a little time, but on the spot, I can't think of anything. I mean, it's just, I feel like we went in with a very specific goal for this film. And so I know that I feel like we got to learn a lot on the history of it. But I would love to know more about what's going on with it present day. That's because we didn't really get to touch on that. And, it's so close to us here. And I think unless you're seeking that information out, a lot of people don't know about that. So it'd be great to make something for this region to be able to share that's about what's going on there. And like you had asked Michelle earlier about, can you dive, can you fish, can you do any of that? A lot of people around here don't know at all about what they're allowed or not allowed to do there. So it would be very cool to do a piece about the current situation there, and how people around here could utilize such an amazing area.
Oh, I like it. We'll let Michelle know about that when she comes back on later.
I think we may have already
see about
mentioned
finding some funds to do that part too. I like that. That sounds good. And I'm sure, she talked about the warming waters of seeing species from the Caribbean, which is an indicator the water is warming. So climate change clearly.
There she is.
Yay! Climate change is clearly probably an issue for many of our national marine sanctuaries, keeping an eye and seeing how that's going to play out in habitats for lots of our marine sanctuaries. Welcome back, Michelle. We missed you. Sorry, we're losing you. So I had asked Liz, maybe this is a good one to wrap up on here. If you could pick another film to do, what would be your dream film to follow up this with? Or it might be too soon. You guys just got this done, but what would you want to see filmed and put out there about Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary?
Right. Gosh, that is a hard one. I would love for us to be able to follow some recreational divers. Diving, where they are seeing the reef for the very first time. Because I'm not a diver, every now and then I just gather people who dive at Gray's Reef, and I just get them around the table and ask them to tell me what it's like the first time. And it's amazing how many of them talk about how mysterious it is, because, Gray's Reef can really have some low visibility because it has so many nutrients in the water. And so they talk about how they're diving down and they can see something coming from far away, and all they see is an outline of something, and then it gets to them, and it's their favorite fish. Kim Robertson talks to me about how black sea bass are like the puppies of Gray's Reef. They surround them so much that they have to shoo them away so they can ride on their tablets and things. And I would just love for us to be able to follow first-time Gray's Reef divers.
That sounds great to me.
That is a great idea. I love that. And I'll follow up, Michelle. When I just lost you before, I was going to ask about the largest animal that comes to Gray's Reef, which you mentioned in the beginning when we first started talking, the right whale, and that I think I have this right. It's the calving grounds.
Yes.
So do they have their babies around Gray's Reef, or do they bring their babies and hang out with them? Can you talk a little bit about what you see?
Right. So as I mentioned, Gray's Reef is only 22 square miles, a little postage stamp in the ocean. And so we are within a larger range that is Georgia and North Florida off the coast. That we're part of the critical habitat, which means it's essential for life for the North Atlantic right whale. And also we're part of the calving ground. Because there are so few right whales and they tend to be a little closer to shore. I think they're normally, when they're migrating from Massachusetts and other places, I think they're usually about 12 miles off, and we're 19 miles off. So that's not something that those of us that work at Gray's Reef right now have seen. But we have satellite tracking and other people that watch, and we've been really excited. Liz may have been following this too, but just in the last month or so, we've had more sightings of moms and calves off the coast of Georgia than I believe we've had in 2 years or 3 years. It's pretty exciting because, as you know, there are only about 400 individuals left in the world.
Wow, that is so cool. That's really exciting. Do those get reported by just people who happen to be out on the water and
I think so.
see them? Yeah.
Yes, the
Wow.
general public is very they're very good at participating and keeping themselves informed about the North Atlantic right whale. They understand just how close to extinction they are, and so everybody tries to be helpful and learn about them. And it looks like we're having a good calving season right now.
That's great news. We all need good news like that. That's fantastic. Wow. I don't see any other questions from viewers. We only have a few more minutes. Did you have any other thoughts about the films that I didn't touch on with the questions or people asked about that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Well, I did want to thank some people. So in addition to Liz and Kyle, of course, and the folks who are actually in the film, it was important to us that the only reason we were able to make this little film was from NOAA's Heritage Program, and they had an opportunity to compete for a grant, and we actually got that grant. And so the NOAA Heritage Program helped us a lot. And then the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation helped with the film. And Gray's Reef is one of the only sanctuaries that actually has a chapter of the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So we have the Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation right here in Savannah. And, you know, people can always join up. They do citizen science projects for us, all kinds of great things. And of course, thanking Liz and Kyle again so much.
That's great. And so if people want to get connected with the foundation or Gray's Reef, maybe our tech folks can put that in the chat for us. So should they, where's the best place to go? Your website or?
Sure, they can go to our website, or they can just, they can Google Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So it's our name with foundation at the end. And they also have a great active Facebook page. We both do. So
that is very cool. And there's volunteer opportunities. So if people want to donate or volunteer their time, they can find out information about that through the foundation's website.
Right.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Well, I also want to thank you both for being part of this conversation, Michelle and Liz. Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary, sharing your perspectives. I have learned a lot. And I loved the film and hearing about the history of how Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary came to be and came to be named. Very cool. And I agree with you, Michelle, that so fortunate you were able to pull this project together before those stories were lost. Super important. And people watching, and you guys can let friends and colleagues know about this conversation. It was recorded while we were talking, so it's going to be available for viewing through January 31st as part of the Thunder Bay International Film Festival. If anybody wants to learn learn about another National Marine Sanctuary with a conversation like this later today at 7 p.m. Eastern. I believe there's going to be a live conversation about Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary, another postage stamp. I like how you use that, Michelle, right? But on our West Coast. So the other ocean. Find out about that 7 o'clock tonight on Thunder Bay National Marine, or excuse me, Friends of Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuaries, Thunder Bay International Film Festival schedule on the website. Well, have a great rest of everybody's day, and goodbye for now. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.